Good morning, listeners, and welcome to yet another podcast series brought to you by Legis Indica. Today, we're discussing the Supreme Court of India's reportable judgment, Urmila Dixit versus Sunil Sharan Dixit.
Morning. Yes, and this deep dive is looking at a really critical question that comes out of this judgment.
Which is,
Can senior citizens in India actually get their property back if they've, say, gifted it or transferred it, but the person they gave it to fails to look after them like they promised?
right, and related to that, can the authorities under the specific law, the Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act, can they actually order someone to be evicted and return the property?
Exactly. That's the core issue.
And this isn't just some theoretical legal point, is it? We're digging into a very recent Supreme Court decision here.
That's right. It has very real implications.
Because, many of us are senior citizens, or we're getting there, or we have parents who are. So understanding these rights, it's not just academic, it's about peace of mind, knowing there are safeguards against, neglect or even exploitation.
This deep dive should hopefully give you a much clearer picture of a really significant legal protection for elders.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Tell us about the specific facts. What happened in this Urmila Dixit case?
Okay, so the case revolves around Urmila Dixit, the mother. She transferred property to her son, Sunil Sharan Dixit. This was done through a formal gift deed.
When was this?
The deed was dated September 7th, 2019, and registered just 2 days later on the 9th. And it's worth mentioning, this wasn't some newly acquired property. She actually bought it way back in 1968.
Wow, okay. So a long-held family asset. But I gather the gift deed wasn't the only document involved. There was something else.
That's absolutely crucial here. Yes, on the exact same day the gift deed was executed, the son, Sunil, also signed something called a Vachan Patra.
A Vachan Patra, what's that?
Think of it as a formal promissory note, a written promise. In it, he explicitly promised to take care of both his parents, Urmila, and her husband for the rest of their lives.
And the connection to the property.
Here's the key part. The Vachan Patra specifically stated that if he failed to provide this lifelong care, his mother, Urmila, would have the right to reclaim the gift deed.
So, effectively cancel the gift and get the property back.
Precisely. It made the gift conditional on the care.
Okay, that seems quite clear. So, what happened next? Why did the mother end up taking legal action?
Well, things clearly didn't go as planned. About a year or so later, December 24th, 2020, Urmila Dixit filed an application with the Subdivisional Magistrate, the SDM.
Under which law?
Under Section 23 of that Senior Citizens Act, we mentioned the Maintenance and Welfare of Parents and Senior Citizens Act, 2007.
And what was her complaint? What did she allege?
She made some pretty serious claims. She alleged there were attacks, attempts to pressure her about transferring even more property, and fundamentally, a complete lack of love and affection from her son.
So basically, he wasn't holding up his end of the bargain laid out in that Vachan Patra.
That was her core argument. The condition of care, the whole basis for the gift, wasn't being met.
Right. How did the courts initially handle this? What did the subdivisional magistrate decide?
The SDM actually sided with the mother. The ruling was that the gift deed was null and void. Canceled.
Okay. Did the son accept that?
No, he appealed. He went to the collector, but his appeal was dismissed. The collector agreed with the SDM's decision.
So, still in the mother's favor, what next?
He then took it higher, filing a writ petition in the High Court of Madhya Pradesh. Initially, a single-judge bench heard the case and again dismissed the son's petition.
So, 3 rulings in favor of the mother.
Correct. At that point, it seemed quite consistent.
But the story doesn't end there, does it?
No, it doesn't. The son filed another appeal, this time a writ appeal within the High Court, to be heard by a division bench, basically, more judges.
And what happened there?
And this is where things changed. The division bench reversed the previous decisions. They actually found the gift deed to be valid, siding with the son.
Wow, quite a turnaround. So that must be why it ended up at the Supreme Court.
Exactly. After losing at the division bench level, Urmila Dixit, the mother, took her appeal to the highest court, the Supreme Court of India.
Okay, so the big question, what did the Supreme Court decide? Who won in the end?
The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the mother, Urmila Dixit.
So they overturned the division bench's decision.
Yes. They upheld the original decision from the single-judge bench of the High Court, and therefore also the initial orders from the SDM and the collector.
Meaning the gift deed was officially canceled.
Correct. The gift deed was invalidated.
That must have been a huge relief for her. And didn't the Supreme Court also make a really important point about the powers of those authorities under the Act?
Yes, they did. And this is really significant. The court stated very clearly that the authorities operating under Section 23 of the Senior Citizens Act do have the power to order eviction.
Eviction of the person who received the property.
Yes. And not just eviction, but also to order that possession of the property be given back to the senior citizen. It's a powerful confirmation of their authority.
Good to know. And who penned this important judgment?
The judgment was authored by Justice Carroll.
Okay. So, we know the outcome: mother gets the property back. Authorities confirmed to have eviction powers. Let's get into the why. What was the Supreme Court's reasoning? Why did they interpret the law this way?
Well, a big part of it was how they viewed the Senior Citizens Act itself. They stressed that it needs to be interpreted liberally with its purpose in mind.
And what is that core purpose, according to the court?
It's about empowering senior citizens, giving them a way to quickly, enforce their rights, especially when they've transferred property expecting care in return. And that care doesn't happen. The focus is on the goal of the law.
Did they refer to any previous cases to support this kind of interpretation?
Yes, they specifically mentioned a 2019 Supreme Court case, K.H. Nazar versus Matthew K. Jacob.
And what principle came from that case?
The Nazar case established a key idea. When you're dealing with beneficial legislation laws designed to help a specific vulnerable group, like senior citizens here, you need a purpose-oriented interpretation.
Meaning?
Meaning you look at the problem the law was trying to fix, and you interpret the law in a way that actually fixes that problem effectively. Don't just stick rigidly to the literal words if it defeats the purpose.
That makes sense. Look at the spirit, not just the letter, especially for protective laws. And did they connect this to the Act's own text?
Absolutely. They pointed to the Act's statement of objects and reasons and its preamble. These parts explicitly state the intention is effective maintenance and welfare for parents and senior citizens.
Which aligns with broader principles.
Yes, the court linked this to constitutional guarantees of social justice. They emphasize that the Act is a piece of beneficial legislation designed to protect the elderly from hardship and neglect, and so it demands a broad, liberal interpretation to make sure it actually works for them.
So it's grounded in protecting vulnerable citizens, a core social value.
Precisely. The court even mentioned the underlying social and moral duty of children to support parents in need, suggesting the law reflects and enforces this societal value, supported by the Constitution.
Okay, so that's the general philosophy: interpret generously to protect elders. How do they apply Section 23, specifically in Urmila Dixit's situation? What conditions needed to be met?
Right, so to apply Section 23, the court looked back at another key case, Sudet Chikara versus Ram T. Devi from 2022. That case laid out two crucial conditions.
Okay, what are they?
First, the property transfer by the senior citizen must have happened with a condition attached specifically, a condition that the senior citizen would be maintained, their basic needs met.
Condition 1, maintenance promise linked to the transfer. What's the second?
Second, the person who received the property, the transferee, must have actually failed to provide that maintenance, those basic amenities and needs they promised.
Got it. So a promise of care tied to the transfer and then a failure to deliver on that promise. Both needed.
Both must be satisfied for Section 23 to kick in and potentially void the transfer.
And in Urmila Dixit's case, how did the Supreme Court find these conditions were met?
They looked closely at both the gift deed and that crucial Vachan Patra, the promissory note. Reading them together, the court found it undeniable that the son had a legal obligation to maintain his mother.
Because of the explicit promise in the Vachan Patra?
Exactly. That note spelled out his promise of lifelong care, and importantly, the consequence: if he failed, she could reclaim the property. The court saw this as a clear condition attached to the transfer.
And the second condition, the failure to provide care.
Well, the mother's allegations, the mistreatment, the pressure for more property, the breakdown of the relationship combined with the existence of that broken promise, were seen as clear evidence that the son had failed to maintain her as agreed.
So that written Vachan Patra was incredibly important evidence.
It really was. It made the conditional nature of the gift explicit. The court then tied this back to the Act's overall purpose,
Which is?
to provide a speedy, simple, and inexpensive remedy for the elderly in these situations. The court reasoned that giving authorities the power under Section 23 to order eviction and return the property directly serves this fundamental objective.
It makes the Act's protection real, not just theoretical.
Precisely. You can find this reasoning detailed in paragraphs 20 to 24 of the judgment.
Okay, so let's bring this home for you, the listener. What's the big takeaway from this Urmila Dixit ruling? Why does it matter to you?
Well, I think it provides really important clarity. It shows there are solid legal protections for senior citizens who transfer property relying on a promise of care. It's a powerful tool against neglect or abuse if that promise is broken.
And the real aha moment here, for me anyway, is how clear the Supreme Court was.
Mhm.
If a promise of maintenance is clearly linked to a property transfer, especially if it's documented, like with that promissory note, it's legally enforceable under this Act. It's not just a moral expectation anymore, it has legal force.
Absolutely. And that raises a practical question for you listening. What actually counts as failure to maintain?
Right. Is it just about food and shelter?
Well, this case suggests it can be broader. While every case depends on its own facts, Urmila Dixit indicates that things like allegations of mistreatment, a breakdown in the supportive relationship, especially when it directly contradicts an agreed-upon promise of care.
That can be enough?
It seems it can be considered a failure to maintain, which could then trigger Section 23 protections.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates on key Indian Supreme Court's decisions.
And just a final thought to leave you with. Considering this ruling, what practical steps might senior citizens think about taking to better protect themselves when transferring property, to make sure their well-being is truly the priority? Does this judgment change how you perhaps view family obligations versus legal rights when it comes to property?
Sure.
Something to ponder.